In today's video, we're going to be going over a full deal breakdown on my 2022 WRX, how much I paid for the car, every aspect of the deal. It won't be a super long video. It's going to be juicy. You're going to be seeing all my financial stuff, and you're going to see the decision making behind what I did, because I did do some things like take a loan on the car, and you guys have always seen me say always pay cash for your cars, and I'm going to show you exactly why I chose to do that and not pay cash for this. But we're going to go through the entirety of the deal, how I got what I think is a pretty dang good price, and walk you through all that. But before you just heard that short spiel, I promise this video will be interesting, and I know for a lot of you guys, you're looking for modification content on the 2022 WRX. It is coming. I want to be very transparent with you guys right now. I'm waiting for parts to be delivered, and it's just taking a long time because there's such supply chain delays. So modification content is coming for this car. We're going to get back to our 2-a-week posting schedule where I got one like generalist video about the car, about Subarus, about the WRX and everything like that, long-term reviews, information, all that kind of stuff, and then one video a week where it's strictly a modification on the car or part of the process of testing a modification and stuff like that. So we're going to go back to that schedule very soon. But before I get too far away from this and get into the numbers, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. Lots of crazy content coming with this WRX. But let's get straight into it. Full deal breakdown, why I chose how I did it. And I'll even at the very end of this video, if you want to stick through that long, I'll talk to you about how I got such a good deal and what my process was, because I think I get a lot of questions. All right, I have my deal sheet or the motor vehicle purchase contract in my hands right now. And we're going to get straight into the numbers before I give you reasonings behind everything that I did. What's important to understand here, guys, is that when you're really getting down to the nitty-gritty on how you're going to get the best deal on a new vehicle, it's not just the purchase price. And a lot of people think that that's a very conflicting statement. And that's because there are things now in today's time and the times around car sales now and for the foreseeable future that are just reality statements that weren't always true. Up until this year, or up until this experience buying a new car, things like waiving dealer fees and getting that thrown out of the equation was very normal. And now dealers don't have the ability to do that. So there are tricks and techniques about how to lower the overall out-the-door price here without scamming yourself or lowering your payment or anything, because I always go into these as if I'm paying cash. And I'm going to walk through how to just get the best deal on the car and position yourself in the best way. So, because you guys want to hear the numbers, and you're going to, I'll explain all the numbers as I go, but the first and most important number, and I think people will be I think this is a good number. The purchase price of this vehicle, this is a 2022 base WRX it's got 4 options on it. So the options altogether add to about $1,000. I think actually $1,300 worth of stuff. So it has the extendable armrest. It has the weather package stuff, so the interior weather stuff, an extra set of mats, the cargo stuff. Basically, I started the negotiation. So before I even tell you how much I paid for it, started the negotiation by making sure that it was valued, that I didn't want any of that stuff, even though the extendable armrest are things that I did want. I wouldn't have paid for them, but it was a nice thing. I paid the purchase price for this vehicle. I paid $28,465 for this vehicle. So, although probably could have saved a couple $100 going a little bit further. If you guys aren't familiar, I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, which is actually right now I think it's the second most expensive place to live in the United States. I think New York this year is #1. We've surpassed all of the cities in California, and the cost of living here is absolutely ridiculous. We're also one of the furthest areas for WRX deliveries from Japan and the United States market, so the cost for companies to get their cars here is just more. I know for a fact I could have gotten the car for a couple $100 less by flying out into the Midwest or flying to California, which I was considering, but I had to factor in the cost of the flight and the gas and driving back. So I actually think I got a pretty good deal because I ended up finding this one locally, which is insane because I wasn't really looking locally. So I paid $28,465 for this car. What I couldn't get rid of for this, and I'll talk about how I pivoted this requirement of what I had to pay for into something that benefited me, was a dealer fee. Now, I call it a dealer fee, but it's really like a title and document fee. And it basically, what that fee is, so you guys can understand, is it's their way to make a little bit of money off the offering of going in and doing stuff like the RMVs, DMV stuff, doing the sales tax, actually filing the paperwork, which at some level it does make sense. It does cost them money to do that. And for your average person that's going in buying a car that's just walking into the dealer and wants to walk out, that's a service fee that they need to have because those people want to pay for the convenience of not having to sit at the RMV or DMV for how many hours and deal with all that, getting the car inspected and all those kinds of things, especially in a state where the dealer that's selling the car can't have it inspected at the dealership that they're selling it from. They have to go somewhere else. So they actually have to go out and do all those things. They have to pay for the inspection, which has a fixed cost, all those kinds of things. So unfortunately, I had to pay $549 for the document fee. Seems like a lot of money. I was very uncomfortable with it. What I did was I got the car for a little bit cheaper. Initially, they wanted to do $28,600, so I got that down $145. And then on top of that, I had them throw in a few things on top that were intangibles for them, but added some value to me. I'll talk about that later. So between those two things, I paid for this car, and this is the, if you don't live in a state with sales tax, my out the door for this vehicle would have been $29,014 flat. Unfortunately, I live in a state with sales tax. I paid $1,813.38 for my sales tax, and with my fee for registration in Massachusetts as well, because I have to pay for registration. I paid $31,002.38 for this car. So the out the door is a little bit higher, especially if you live in a state with no sales tax. But if you forget sales tax for a second, the fact that I got this car for $29,014 is pretty dang good. Even without any of the options there, I bought this for significantly under sticker. I got it for just over what the technical invoice is for the car. I actually got it for less than what the dealer paid for it. But that's just because they were liquidating, because obviously some dealers have too many allotments of WRXs at any given time. So got it for a little bit under what they paid for it, but still above what invoice is. But having looked very hard, it doesn't look like anyone can get anything near invoice, because every dealer paid over invoice to get the allotment of the WRX in the first place, because they were so desperate for cars. So with all of this information, before I talk about how I paid the $31,000, because that's also interesting, so don't miss that, because that's super important here. I wanted to talk about some of the nuances around what I actually paid here, specifically around the documentation preparation fee. So that was $549. So because it's really hard in today's day and age, because dealers are making so little money, especially when they're taking losses, just with what's happening with the economy, it's hard for them to remove that, because that is something that directly pays for their employee and hourly workforce wages around making a deal. So they're kind of like charging the customer for the workforce associated with actually closing the deal and providing the convenience factor. But when you're in a situation like that, it's really hard to get rid of that fee, because it's just how the business and sales side and how money flows through these organizations. So what you can do is you can ask for some credit against the price of the vehicle, which I did, which I got it a little bit lower. It doesn't really change it. From a tax perspective, it probably helps the dealer still. But what I did do is I had them throw in some other things that helps that reduce the burden on my end for what I was paying for. So I negotiated in. Some dealers throw this in, some dealers take it out. You really get them down to the baseline price, which is what happened here. You know, they took out all the benefits of like first oil change, all those things, because I got to the point where I was just getting the car for so little that I then negotiated that back in, because that wasn't part of the deal. So I made sure that I would do a first oil change, a second oil change, and then a few things surrounding the way that I paid for the car. So at the very least, when you just think about the cost of it, like 2 oil changes, you know, what is that, $80 an oil change? So I got $145 off the car, and then I got $160 off the cost of the oil changes. So that $549 fee went down $145, then it went down $160. So really it's like $249, which when I think about it from a time perspective, the fact that I'd spend a day leaving work trying to get to the RMV or the DMV, trying to figure out how to get it home, all those things, all the nuance around my time, it was worth it for me. You know, I probably could have gone harder and tried to fight a little bit more, but at that point, totally worth the dollar bills for me. But that's a trick in which where you're going to definitely pay the money, but use things that they offer already that you can take out and get from it. I did try to negotiate them dropping the pan for the RTV issue, which is going to be a whole nother video in and of itself. They would not do that. They even played the I don't know what you're talking about RTV thing. So interesting comment there. If you guys didn't already know, dealers, when they finance the car through their own organization, so when the dealer provides financing, the dealership itself isn't financing the car for large manufacturers. It's actually the finance company from the OEM manufacturer. Subaru, who works with Chase Bank, actually finances the deal if you finance through them. So Subaru makes money on that financing, as does Chase Bank, because it's lending money, and the dealership doesn't directly make money from that. So what they get is what's called a kickback, where the dealer gets just an upfront fee for the amount financed from Subaru on their vehicle as kind of like a rebate, so they can bake a little bit more money in, they have a little bit more room. So what I did in this instance, for 2 reasons here, but this was the primary reason, to drop the cost of the car further, right, is I financed a portion of it so that I could have them drop the car thinking that they're going to get the kickback, with the full knowledge of at any given time I can just pay the car off. Because my initial intention, and what I've done with every car that I've ever purchased, was I just buy my cars cash, right? But I used this tool to make sure I had more room and more negotiating power at the dealer to make sure I got a good deal. Also, again, with the balance of I found this locally and I was doing everything I could not to spend 150 plus on a flight one way, $300 on gas back from the Midwest, because that's already $450. So although I probably could have used the same techniques to get something like for 18 grand instead of 18.4 out the, for a purchase price, again, I would have lost that on the cost of travel. The other nuance around taking a financing terms is actually super interesting and more of a personal finance side of things. What I figured out was the fact that if you did a 48-month loan with the WRXs and it's still live, you get 2.9% financing, assuming your credit and everything else is good enough through Subaru. What's interesting here is if your intention is to buy the car cash, or if you're just savvy with your money and this isn't a risk, things like Wealthfront and Robinhood, just their savings accounts right now have APYs that are higher than the APR for the financing for this car. So I'm paying 2.9% on the money borrowed, but with my Wealthfront account, which is just a savings account, which I can withdraw the money at any given time, it's not a money market account, I'm getting 4.1% interest on it. So I'm literally making money on the money that I'd otherwise have put in this car month over month, year over year, and it's almost like paying part of the car down. Now, it's not significant, but it'll pay for, over the lifespan of the car if I really take advantage of it. I'm going to see it's going to be in the hundreds. It's not going to be in the thousands, but it'll be in the high hundreds of dollars, that just having the money sit in my Wealthfront account versus sitting in the car itself, right, will grow. You guys are probably interested in exactly what I did. So I actually sold my Miata for cash, and at least in Massachusetts, but it might be a federal thing, if you pay for something that's more than $10,000 in cash, you have to do like the whole IRS paperwork and all that kind of stuff. So I took part of what I sold my Miata for, I put $9,900 down in cash, and then I financed the rest. So my finance amount was $22,402.56. Be honest with you guys, I have no idea what the payment was, because I think I just set it at $700 or $800 as an arbitrary value, because I want to I'll be honest with you guys, I mean, if you watch the channel, I hate the idea of financing a car, because there's just I don't own it technically, or I kind of do, I don't, the bank owns it, and I'm willing to pay for the headspace just to own the car. In this instance, I made the personal finance decision of I will gain more dollars essentially by financing this amount and not just putting it all in the car. But I was just I'm gonna somewhat double the payment or whatever this is, just so that I can have the headspace. And it's I think at this rate I'll pay it off in 2 years, just because again, it's just coming from the Wealthfront account because the money's there. I mean, you don't need the nuance of that, but that's why I chose to do it. So for the two benefits of, one, bringing the price of the car down, and also we're having the negotiation room because they're getting a kickback on the financing, but also then having the freedom of knowing that my money will make more money than the actual cost of interest on this vehicle, at least for the near future. So there's a lot of power there. The last thing I wanted to talk about in this video is just the process of searching for a vehicle and what I did and how that kind of and I'll put this down, and what that all looked like for this car. So I got to the point where I'd sold the Miata, and this is advice for anyone out there looking to do this. If you want to get a 2022 or a 2023 WRX, you get to the point where you're I'm ready to buy. You figured out exactly what you're doing from a finance perspective. Are you financing? Are you buying cash? How are you doing it? Are you going to get pre-approved from Subaru? Have you done all that? You're ready to purchase the car. You know exactly what you're purchasing. You know exactly what color. There's no shopping questions, because that's where you're going to lose already. You need to know exactly what you're looking for. If you want to get the best deal, once you've done that, you look nationwide, exactly what I did. I happened to get lucky with getting something local. It's the first local car that I've ever bought. I've always traveled for my vehicles. You know exactly what you want. You go on, and you don't just look for the cheapest ones. In fact, you don't just look for the cheapest 10%. You go out and reach out to as many dealers as possible. I can tell you for sure, this car was listed as one of the more expensive cars on the list of cars that I was looking at. They just seemed to have the room, and I just called them. So once I was this is exactly what I'm buying, I probably spent 2 straight weeks calling dealers and just negotiating and trying to make deals. And it was just look, this is the number where I want to be at, right? And this is how I started. I was I want to be at this number, right? I finally got to that number in the first day, and then I was I got to that fast. I wonder if I can go lower. And I said, I called new dealers, and I said, look, I got this offer from another dealer, and I picked a lower number, and I said, can you match it or get close? You're closer to me. Played that talk track. And then I brought the offer down that I got from the other one and was like, look, I got a cheaper offer. And I just kept negotiating down. And I guess this is like, it's not sleazy, it's a little disrespectful of people's time, but when you're thinking as an individual consumer, you're just trying to get the best deal possible, and ultimately you're helping the person that's willing to make the deal with you. So it's not terrible, but it's also like, you know, I only say that because I come from sales as well. I have a sales organization, so I know what it's like. But I just called. I spent 2 weeks calling and talking to people pretty much all day, just as many calls as I possibly could. You know, I obviously work, so not during the workday, but I was shooting text. I was calling, 5 o'clock hit, and I was on the phone until 8 o'clock when the dealers closed, just calling, trying to make as many deals. And if you do that, if you dedicate that time, it feels daunting, it feels crazy, you'll get the best possible deal, right? You'll also get a very acute and aware understanding of what the rest of the market looks like, at least in that period of time. And you'll at least know that when you do buy the car that you want, at least in the period of time where you were like, I need a car now, this is what I'm getting, you make sure you get the cheapest one. So that is what I did. That is what I've done. That's exactly what I paid for the car. And again, lots of videos to come, but I know a lot of you guys were asking for this, and that's everything about the finances of this vehicle, what I paid and how much I paid for it. And I've just reiterated the same thing multiple times and how I paid for it. Videos are going to ramp up. You'll see more of this car shortly, and hopefully as parts come in, we start doing some cool things to this car, and I'll see you guys in the next video.